Playoff hunt. Everything is on the table this week as fantasy MLR managers fight for the last fantasy MLR playoff spots in MLR 2024. On this week's episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, we break it all down, talk about the week 14 that was, give you some waiver wire advice, and look ahead to a week that's going to be as pivotal as it gets this season. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 111 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you each and every single week, Matt Yee, Devin, Vandy, Vanderpool. I'm Ryan Yee, here on another edition of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, inching closer and closer to the Fantasy MLR playoffs. And boys, each and every week means a little bit more moving forward. And it looks like this past week 14 meant a whole bunch to your Supreme Commissioner. Because, oh, baby, look who's made playoffs in his first season. And I had to open up the show with that because, man, it feels good.
Way to just give yourself your own flowers right off the rip.
Yeah, man, act like you've been there before, bud.
Geez.
No, well, that's the thing. I never have, and I'm going to take
like
it.
You,
It feels
like
good.
You've been there
Neither
before.
have I, buddy. Neither have I.
That's true. There you go. So, hey, Vandy, all I got to say, maybe it's just a little bit of luck on my side, but what can I say?
Yeah,
First,
1,100 points against don't help.
There you go. First crack at me doing this. Lock it in here. Going to compete here for the big chip. Here for
Vandy,
the
we'll
Fantasy
knock him off
MLR
his
League.
pedestal soon.
No,
We'll knock him off his pedestal soon. We will.
I can't wait, bud.
Yeah.
But hey, we got a jam-packed episode in this one. Like I said at the top of the show, playoff hunt has begun for a lot of leagues here in Fantasy MLR. The playoffs beginning here for our OG Fantasy Ruckers League. So it's going to be exciting, and every single week is going to mean a little bit more moving forward. We're going to break down the exciting week that was in week 14, talk a little bit of waiver wire, dish out some team of the week honorees.
Oh, wow.
Week 15 preview, looking ahead. We got a busy one, no buys this upcoming week, so what a perfect timing to kind of have every single team playing. So no excuses this week for you to put out a full lineup. And yeah, we mentioned on our last episode, fun little partnership with OvalYe, who has challenged us to competing in their tournaments, both free to play and their NFT style tournament, including Vandy, your favorite Triple D segment at the end of the show. But I mean, before we get into it, guys, I mean, what an exciting week that was. I was on the edge of my seat punching in the stats here from week 14. I was up 20 points ahead of Rugby Wrap Up going into that final day. We had our live stream on Sunday, watching the New England Free Jacks Dallas Jackals game, which was a lot of fun. Thank you to all of our fantasy community members that joined us for that. And had an all right performance from some of those guys. Not enough to make me feel good going into that last RFC Los Angeles Miami Sharks game. And what a barn burner we had there for a lot of RFC Los Angeles guys. And until I put in the stats this morning, I had no idea what the future of my fantasy playoff standing was going to look like. But hey, we look all right.
Yeah,
That's gotta
it seems
be
like they
weird
worked
for you.
out for you.
You know, every number you punch in, you're always like, you're either like, oh, damn, or let's go.
Oh, it's the weirdest feeling.
Yeah,
man.
I was gonna
it's
say
the weirdest feeling because, like, I mean, in regular fantasy sports, right? You just wake up, you refresh your page, and you know instantly kind of like what's going to happen and then what everyone's doing. But when it comes to this, I wake up, you know, Monday morning, I have all the stats in front of me to put in those final numbers, and it's like a long, drawn out, just like twisting of the arm, and it's just like, okay, well, I put one guy's numbers in, and it's just like, oh, that's not good. I'm definitely losing. And then it swings right to the other. It swings to the other side where I have a guy. And I'm like, oh, there we go. He did great. I'm gonna win this thing. So yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster of emotions to start off my week. That's for sure, Vandy.
I bet, bud.
All right. Well, like I said, jam-packed episode. But before we get into it, like we say every single episode, if you aren't already, follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers. Handles up above if you're watching on the YouTube video. Links down below if you're listening on the pod. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Helps us a long way. We're continuing to grow this thing. Subscribers on YouTube slowly going up here. We want to hit that 100 number. So help us get there and do that. And again, keep continuing to support this mission of making fantasy MLR a reality in the league. Join our Discord community. We've got a fun group of people over there that like to talk MLR, fantasy MLR, rugby across the world. Really good group of guys over there as part of our Fantasy Ruckers community. And hey, check out the fantasyruckers.com too, our platform for fantasy MLR, which has a whole bunch of good stuff over there. I've heard a lot of people, even if they're not playing fantasy MLR, use our website as a key kind of resource when it comes to just knowing stats about the latest ongoings in Major League Rugby. If they're doing their OvalYe lineup, maybe it's a nice little resource to have. If you're playing, of course, in the fantasy MLR leagues that we have, and just keeping in tune with the league as 2024 progresses.
Oh, yeah, buddy.
Use the site. Let's go.
All right, let's get into it. News and notes here to start off this episode 111. Had a few signings that happened over the course of the past 7 days that are interesting to see late into this season, and we'll break them down to see whether or not they're actually going to have a fantasy impact. Let's start off with Anthem Rugby Carolina, who signs fullback / fly half Steven Crimp for the remainder of the MLR 2024 season. Was named to the USA Rugby extended squad in early May. He's been with Cardiff, Met RFC, and also British Universities and College Sports Club as well too. So Crimp moving on over to Anthem Rugby Carolina, and we did see him in the lineup the past weekend. I believe he got like 50 minutes of play here for Anthem.
I believe, correction, Ryan, Cardiff Met is a club or the university within the Bucks League.
There you go.
So he didn't play for both. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he slots in. I thought this was like for sure meaning that Oscar Collar wasn't coming back for the rest of the year, but it seems like Oscar Collar was back this season, was back in the last game. So interesting to see where he fits into this lineup, but I think this fits their brand perfectly. U.S. eligible young guy who is just on the cusp of becoming the next U.S. guy for the 2030 whatever World Cup.
And that was the interesting thing too, seeing Oscar Collar back in the lineup, because we had been speculating over the course of the past several weeks. He obviously had that injury a little while back, and then the thoughts that he would be moving over to the Bunnings MPC and playing over there, and we see him back in the lineup.
Well, North Harbor released their wider training squad lineup, and he was not in there at the same time as they released that Oscar Collar was playing this weekend. So, yeah, he's definitely not back in New Zealand, and it seemed like that ankle was just holding him up.
All right, now let's shift on over to another handful of signings by the New England Free Jacks, who announced a few additions here for the 2024 season. We got Oscar Lennon, the scrum half, U.S. eligible, ex-Hartpury RFC player, joins from the Bristol Bears. He goes to the New England Free Jacks, along with Toby Fricker, another U.S. eligible player, an ex-Bristol winger, joining from Scarlets Rugby, and then Jed Melvin, the back rower, joining from Harbour Rugby there overseas in New Zealand. So several guys going to the New England Free Jacks over the past week.
Yeah, we move on from Oscar Collar to another North Harbor man, Jed Melvin, who actually found his way in the lineup coming off the bench. I believe he got some playing time, but yeah, he already got in there. It'd be interesting to see. We talked about in our live stream, the back row is a place where they have a lot of injuries. Scrum half, obviously they lose John Boland, and then Toby Fricker is kind of that weird one where, you know, their back three is just coming back into healthy form. So,
I mean, I guess a deep team can never have enough players, especially with the injuries that they've faced this season. So we'll see whether or not any of these guys become fantasy relevant. Any of these guys, Maddie, on this list, are you keeping an extra eye on here as potential impactful guys? For me, not really anyone that really jumps off the page. If you see it when the lineups come out, then maybe you can hop on it. But really, at this point, I don't see, especially with the return of Oscar Collar. I mean, if Oscar Collar was still out and this Steven Crimp signing happened, like maybe you look at him as a potential late fly half addition if you do need a fly half position because it's so thin there. But at this point, I think, you know, it's just a watch and see approach with these guys.
Yeah, I have to agree.
All right, let's move on.
Would you take a flyer on him just if you're slim there?
I think because Oscar Collar is back, you don't even need to even consider it. We've seen Clive and Lauser take that 10 position too. So already there would have been questions. But Stephen Crimp, I mean, Oscar Collar returning, I think Oscar Collar owners would have been probably hopping on Stephen Crimp if he wasn't in the lineup this past week. But I think that changes things.
Yep.
All right, let's go on over to now some suspensions. Last week, we talked about the suspension to Dylan Nell, who is going to be out for, what was it? Last week was like 5 weeks, so he'll have 4 weeks left on his ban. So he basically becomes irrelevant in the fantasy MLR space with him returning after the playoffs have already occurred. When it comes to fantasy, he'll be back with Utah, I guess, if they kind of go towards the tail end of their season, plus, if I'm doing my math correctly, if they make playoffs, which obviously that race in the West is getting tight. But a couple other suspensions to talk about that happened last week. Manuel Ardeo of the Miami Sharks, the back rower, who's been pretty stellar for fantasy. He's out 2 weeks, so he'll have 1 week left in his suspension. And just wanted to throw this in here on this show because it did happen last week. He wasn't available last week. He'll be back this weekend. But Tavita Nakali of Old Glory DC was also served a 1 week suspension. But he'll be back again against New England this coming Week 15 weekend. Interesting, though, because both of them were cited for the same thing, repeated infractions and yellow cards. Interesting to see that they got differing levels of suspensions when it came to that.
Well, because Nick Alley got a red card last game and Manuel Ardeo's had 7 yellow cards in 8 games. So I think that makes sense.
Check out.
Okay. Hey, the Maddie's doing the card math there to get things sorted on this Fantasy Ruckers Show. That's why we have you on the show, Maddie.
That's right. That's the only reason.
Around. Only reason.
Yeah, okay, buddy.
All right, and then last piece of news that I want to talk about is we got a big, exciting announcement when it comes to looking forward to the MLR playoff landscape, so kind of in tune with our fantasy MLR playoffs. But the Houston SaberCats are the very first team in the MLR to clinch a playoff spot. I believe they're 11-1 right now. They have now made the postseason 3 years in a row, but have yet, surprisingly, according to James Dealey of MLR Stats, have not won a game in the playoffs yet. That's most likely, unless something crazy happens, is going to change this playoff. But Houston, with how well they've been playing, rightfully so, becoming the first team to clinch the playoffs here in MLR 2024.
Yeah, good for them. They deserve it. And they're head and shoulders above the rest of the league at the moment.
Just a buzz.
All right. All right. Well, let's keep things moving here, boys, for your favorite segment of the show.
It's our chance here, Vandy.
Right, buddy.
This is where we go. This is where we cook, Vandy. This is where we cook,
Gas
Vandy.
me
This
up,
is where
baby.
we
Gas
go.
me up.
This is where we cook.
Hear ye, hear ye.
Let's go, Vandy. Yeah, he gave himself his flowers. This is where we
Supreme
cook.
Commissioner Yee with
This
a
is
Fantasy
where we
Ruckers
cook.
Leagues update. A reluctant Fantasy Ruckers Leagues update, because we always start this segment with an announcement when it comes to our Week 14 weekly challenge. And we'd like to give a shout out to the community member, the fantasy league member in the Fantasy Ruckers space that did the best this past week when it comes to our weekly challenge. And it wasn't any of us. Maddie, you won it last week. So good to see another Fantasy Ruckers League member coming up here and showing us up. But Grand Vizier CA coming in and getting the highest point total of the week by almost 10 points, 63 points for him. He is now fifth on the season with 632.5. So shout out to Grand Vizier CA for winning the weekly challenge this week.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, keep
congrats.
going.
Oh, yeah, you want to keep going. Oh,
keep going.
I didn't know. Well,
go to
I guess
go to fifth.
I guess
and
we
then walk
also
down the list and down the road, across the corner,
That's right.
around the
All
block,
the way
down the
downstairs.
hill, and up another hill to go get to where
I
you
don't
were
want to
this
do
week,
it.
Ryan.
I don't want to do it, but I have to, as I am an impartial commissioner, despite the Supreme tag. We always mention how we are doing here on this show when it comes to the weekly challenge. Maddie finishing fourth, Vandy finishing fifth. I think your best finish on the season, and I'm down there in 10th. But we don't need to talk about that.
Oh, down there in 10th. Where else did you move?
I think I was
which means
9th, man. 10th?
With
10th,
I know.
bad.
10th, I know.
10th's pretty. What do you mean? Hey, Vandy, you know what we can always expect from Ryan?
Mediocrity.
Mediocrity.
Okay, enjoy this. Enjoy this,
in the
boys.
middle of the pack.
Enjoy
That's what we can always expect from this guy.
right.
Mediocrity. Middle of the pack in weekly challenge.
That's right.
Middle of the pack in the Fantasy Ruckers League. This guy is just straight mediocrity all the time.
Enjoy it while you can. Yes, reluctantly, Matt, with that finish over me by 6 spots, you have now surpassed me by, let me do the math here, by 6 points now to be best in the weekly challenge for this season. I have now dropped down to second.
I'm catching
in
up.
third place is John
us cook,
Fitzpatrick
Vandy.
of Rugby Morning.
Yeah, let us cook, Vandy.
I'm right
that was
there.
our time to shine right there.
Vandy, yeah, you've jumped up to 8th. That's pretty solid, man. Pretty solid.
Yeah,
fifth
that's
fifth
right.
place
That's
finish.
right.
That's
Oh,
pretty.
how the turns table.
How the
Look at you
turns
over there.
table, baby.
Look at you over there sending some flowers to Vandy.
That's
It's
right.
true.
That's right.
I need to do it. I mean, like I said, I'm a commissioner of the people, so I'm gonna do it when I can.
Wrong.
But hey, all right. Well, that's enough of that because I hated that every single bit of it. Did not enjoy that one bit. So I gotta go back, reset, and do a little bit more weekly challenge research into this one. But let's give a shout out to our top fantasy performer of the week. We got to give a shout out. Points have been hard to come by for our league members over this past several weeks because we haven't had a triple digit point scorer in quite a while here, and week 14 is no different. But we still had a big time performer in huge malls managed by your pizza guy, who scored 91.7 fantasy points over the week in the Tryhards League, I believe. So congratulations to your pizza guy for your huge malls team showing up this week and putting on a big time performance.
I hope he's not my pizza guy.
Yeah, hopefully he's not my pizza guy. Getting that inside knowledge, and luckily he wasn't in our league because my points, even though it helped me get in the playoffs, would not even been near that to get across there. So we'll see. But hey, let's shift on over to the last announcement when it comes to our Fantasy Ruckers leagues. Got to give a little reminder here. We mentioned it at the top of the show: playoffs. Talking about playoffs. Playoffs. For our OG Fantasy Ruckers League, our playoffs are beginning this week. Top 2 teams getting a bye. Reluctantly, it's Rugby Morning, John Fitzpatrick, and Matt Yee somehow crawling his way back up to the second spot. You know, I don't understand it. He was on the cusp for so long, and he's back up there. So those two getting a bye, and our next league members from 4 to 6 coming in: Farrell Hippie, Stephen Lowen, our community moderator, getting through; Lads on Tour, who's our very inaugural winner of our Fantasy Ruckers League. He gets in. Hey, look at me! Not even 6th here, not even last spot. Came in 5th. Supreme Commissioner Yee, myself getting in the 5th spot. And LaRouge Rugby, first year playing, he gets in as well. Vandy, unfortunately, you're not getting it in again this year. So it looks like you'll be that is true. Moral victories. I have to inform you, though, Vandy, you are returning for another year of the Fantasy Ruckers University. We are calling you back, and you have not passed the final year of your education.
You know what? All I aim for is 50s in schools.
There you go. Well, you're still trying to get
that one tie to put you ahead of Steven is wild. The fact that you tied when we have a decimal system is crazy.
That's
It is crazy. It is crazy.
Just what I do.
I will say that tie came against Dankus Anchors, who is last in our league. So,
hey man, he had a good week.
He had a good week.
You would have beat him by 0.4 by 3, but.
And then last point here, guys, is then shifting on over to the rest of our Fantasy Ruckers leagues. Playoffs will start. Talking about playoffs. We are starting that in week 16. So you have one more week of your regular season. That's why it comes down to the wire. This week is probably going to have huge implication on those seedings. If you're going to be getting into your playoffs, those are 8-man leagues. 4 teams make playoffs. You'll have your semifinals in week 16 and the final in week 17 here when it comes to the MLR. So get those lineups in, fight for those spots because, hey, you never know what's going to happen. And fantasy gets crazy sometimes. So make sure you don't take an off week here because you never know how the cards are going to unfold, and you could find yourself in 5th place in your first ever season, just like Supreme Commissioner Yee.
Oof.
You like that, eh? I like finishing the segment like that. All right.
You like doing the mic drop, eh? You're a big mic drop guy.
Well, what can I say? It's all about the flair, Vandy. All about the flair. Well, let's go into the exciting week 14 that was. Chicago, Seattle on bye had 5 matches over the weekend, none on Friday, 3 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. And I feel like we say this every single episode, but I mean, we start off sporting events typically with the Anthem. We're going to start off with the Anthem when it comes to Major League Rugby. So Old Glory DC take it on Anthem RC at home. We thought maybe it would be the week that Anthem would be able to get their first ever franchise win. They looked like that for about the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it went the other way, and Old Glory DC takes it 47-29. They move up to 5-5-2. Anthem falls once again to 0-12.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on our stream. I think we went through each of the games, so I won't go into too much depth. But Anthem started off strong. I thought I had high hopes for them. I had them in my picks. I had high hopes for them going in. After about 20 minutes after that first water break, it seemed like they just fell off, and Old Glory DC started to really take control of the game. But yeah, I mean, they went into halftime, I think tied. They were probably feeling pretty good about themselves. Came out of half, got a yellow card, and Old Glory DC picked up the pace of play, and they just went for it. I think the big loss, and we'll get into fantasy-wise, the big loss was Gaffa. He scored a try. He set up the first try for the Anthem, and losing him, I mean, he was already on like 43 or something meters gained in 15 minutes. So that was a big loss, and he had a good game for the Anthem side, even though he only played 15 minutes.
So I think we can confidently say at this point of the season, I mean, the over-under was 3 wins heading into this. They're probably not going to win a match this year, right?
No.
Hey, last week of the season.
Unless somebody's resting for the playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Last week of the season.
I mean, how good are Anthem fans going to feel? You know what I mean? Like, that victory is going to feel basically like an MLR Shield win. Basically.
I think they're going to have to wait a bit.
But let's get into some fantasy performers here. A couple Team of the Week honorees to dish out. Our first one is our front row Team of the Week player, and that's Stephen Big Boy Longwell. Because, man, who would have predicted that Longwell would be the guy that's scoring massive in this one? None of his tries, the 3 of them, coming off of set piece, all of them off of breakdowns, and he racks up 18.3 fantasy points. If you had Longwell in your lineup for some reason, you were winning your fantasy week this week. He had only 9 meters gained, but 9 important meters that probably led to those 3 tries, and then 8 tackles in the 58 minutes he played. I mean, Longwell, easily your front row player of the week.
2 of them were like a meter or 2 out, man. It was crazy.
Right.
He just hit the lane and no problem.
If you're a big boy that can sniff the line, that's what happens. You get hat tricks.
All right, and then our other Team of the Week honoree to hand out in this match, it was the weekend of scrum halves, because scrum halves were just absolutely tearing it up. And there were just massive performances out of position that you just don't get much fantasy production.
I told you guys to pick them up.
You did say that. But COC Nye, coming off the bench, scores 2 tries, has 89 meters gained, and 6 tackles in just 29 minutes played. COC Nye made a statement there for the Anthem in this one. And again, another position that, like I said, just doesn't give you much fantasy production. If you had COC Nye for some reason in your lineup, you were winning your fantasy week. And these are just 2 big time plays. If you had the faith into that, it would have been crazy. There was no way, Maddie.
I got a tough time doing
starting COC Nye. Like, he coming off the bench.
I didn't need him.
There you go.
But I was just saying, I told people to pick him up.
That's true. That is
true.
Hey,
he's a change of pace guy. He's the pace guy. You see him on the quick taps. You see him sniping around the ruck. He's a change of pace guy. He's going to start this upcoming week, but he's a guy that comes in and changes the pace for them.
And we'll get into him more in our waiver wire segment, because I think a lot of fantasy managers kind of lost that confidence in him was seeing that he was coming off the bench and knowing that the scrum half position doesn't provide you much fantasy value. You had to quickly pivot to make another decision. But I guess one last question before we move on to the last guys here is, like, COC Nye, one of those guys, kind of like a Connor Tupai kind of player, where he has that threat of being lethal offensively, like you're saying, Maddie, where even if he's coming off the bench and just playing 20 minutes, like, you can be comfortable by putting him in your lineup and still getting some fantasy production.
I don't know about that. I mean, I was kidding. Yes, I did call him. If he started, I would have started him. Since he's coming on the bench, I wouldn't have started him. Nobody should have started him. But yeah, no, I don't know about that. I don't even think Connor Tupai is a guy that I would play if he was coming off the bench. I don't think anybody in the league, any 9, I'm playing if they're coming off the bench.
Yeah,
play the guy that's
hard to trust that position.
Yeah, really hard. All right, a couple other guys. Tarangatira Waitoki, I think fantasy managers can kind of exhale with a breath because after getting subbed off with an injury in that match before the bye, he comes back in full health, plays the full 80 minutes, scores 14.8 fantasy points with the late try that he scored. He's now second on the year, just 3 points back from Wayne Vanderbank for the best fantasy player of the season, which is incredible to think about. Jason Robertson, 13 points. Sebastian Zaridze, 13 points. And William Talatina, 11.9.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
All right, NOLA Gold, Houston SaberCats is your next one. It kicked off on 8 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. Houston really just coming out the gates, locking it up. Quick 21 points, and then just kind of stifles defensively the NOLA Gold, who doesn't score their first and only 7 points of the game until the later portions of it. Houston, I mean, Houston's Houston. They're the best team in the league by, I think, a mile. And they're going to continue to have these performances. They're now 11-1. NOLA is 7-5. Really not much to say about this match. It really just was a clinical performance by Houston. NOLA, again, just throwing smoke screens. You're going to have a good match one week, and you're going to have kind of these matches again. It's hard to tell against the best team in the MLR, but again, NOLA was kind of on the heater there moving forward after a couple confidence. You would have liked to see more than 7 points and a little bit of a closer match as a kind of litmus test against the best team in the league.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's tough. Like, the conditions were absolutely awful. It was pouring. And the jerseys, they still look good. City jerseys still look good, but you know, it was pouring. It was hard to tell. What a nice to see him in the sun, and what a nice to watch some rugby in the sun too, to see the boys play around a bit. I think NOLA was clearly impacted by both the Houston D plus the conditions. They were knocking it all, making way too many mistakes in the red zone.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And that try getting called off was a killer, man.
Yeah.
That's a couple times NOLA's gotten that, where a pretty critical try gets called off.
And hey, I mean, we talk about pretty critical injury to Ed Fido, especially as we head into fantasy managers playoffs in our league next week. In the next leagues, if he's out for long term, that's going to be a tough going for those Ed Fido managers, Ryan. And
that's true. I do have them, and it's tough because, you know, this is only having me questions. You know, Vandy, in fantasy football, there's always those players where you're kind of like, I don't think I can draft him just because he causes me such a headache despite when he's good. Like, Ed Fido for me is becoming one of those guys where like when he's on the field, just electric, just incredible, at least this season. And it's just, he's been dealing with injury all year long, which has just made it hard to really build confidence in him and feel comfortable just as a lock and start play. He got negative points this week with the injury in the first minute. I'm sweating a little bit. I'm going to have to look at a back three option moving forward, but you're right, Maddie. For owners out there with Ed Fido who are hitting the playoffs, it's going to be a tough stretch.
Yeah. And I mean, last thing to say about the game, Houston, that second half, they just decided NOLA can't do anything with the ball. I'm just going to kick it to them and make them run back. And that's all they did in that second half. That's why they didn't score any more points. That's why NOLA didn't score any more points, because they absolutely sucked with the ball in hand. But to kind of move over to our fantasy, look at that. I dropped JP Duplessis on the weekend. Okay. Ooh. I dropped him. I've dropped both my first and second round picks. They're gone. They're off my lineup.
And you're second. Crazy.
And I think JP Duplessis actually was a lot more involved in this game. He was a lot more involved in this game. Didn't really show up again in the fantasy wise, but he got 7.9 points, I think. But like, God, like even when he looks involved, 7.5 points, even when he looks involved, he still isn't converting into fantasy.
Yeah. It's going to be crazy to see his fall from grace next year in the draft. Like, where is he going to go?
Fly right back up.
Right, exactly. And that's just the nature of fantasy MLR. Just one guy that I want to mention that's fantasy relevant. I mean, only 28 points scored. We only had one player that scored in the double digits, and that's Andre Warner, who's going to be one of the best nines from a fantasy perspective. I mean, not many scrum halves are doing that block kick there and scoring that try. Yeah. Andre Warner doing that there. Just kind of has that lethal threat there. Warner, just a fantastic nine player, consistent nine player for you. 20 meters gained, a try, 5 tackles. He hovers around kind of that 8-point mark, which is just such an advantage at the 9 position each and every week. Like, that just means you're getting like 4 or 5 points more than your opposer, your matchup every single week. And yes, you see Maddie shrugging his shoulders on the YouTube video. Of course, Maddie has Andre Warner there in his team. That's second now.
I thought he got a little banged up on that try, but it seemed to be good.
Yeah. Well, we talked on the stream. Maddie very similarly
put his body on the line.
Maddie very similarly in his playing days did a very similar play, which I don't know if that goes to show you, Matt, how dynamic of a player you are, I guess. But
no, I did not score. I did not score on mine. I just broke my hand. Okay.
Matt, the block kick made him break his hand, Vandy. And he
By the way, it It wasn't even blocking the kick that I broke my hand
Fell on it,
was
didn't you?
as I was landing, I brushed the grass on my hand on the ground and then broke my hand there.
Oh, brutal
I didn't
luck,
even block
bud.
the kick, by the way.
You
I
missed
just
it.
jumped. Yeah.
And then you
Well,
broke your hand.
Look, I'm like 5'0". I'm trying to block a kick with a credit card vertical. The heck do you want me to do? Unless
all
it's a
right.
grubber, I'm not blocking anything.
All right. Well, let's shift on over now to our last matchup of the Saturday. Vandy, tough one for you, bud. Utah Warriors taking on the San Diego Legion at home. I hate those orange jerseys. That's probably why they lost. I hate
thought
them.
they looked
Vandy,
good.
No.
Didn't they look like Gil Gronies? They
Yeah,
look
they
like
did. It
the
was a
Austin
shout-out
Gil
to 'em.
Gronies.
It was a shout out to him.
Oh yeah, you want to shout out to them? Give them another shout out.
For me, orange is just not a very appealing
I like
sports
orange.
color.
They look like an orange creamsicle.
Yeah.
And what's wrong with it?
It was a weird orange too. It wasn't even creamsicle. It was like a brown
Okay,
tinge.
I'll be honest. I
don't
thought
know.
they looked better, like live than the picture.
All
But
right,
I guess
well,
that's just a fandom. In
I
me.
guess we got to order you maybe we'll go on the auction. How much money you got, Vandy, that you're winning? Let's use the money that you won in your Triple D bets and let's get you a game
How do you,
Yeah,
what do
well,
you think? Do you think
jersey.
We're not
you
even
think you look
close,
good
bud.
in orange creamsicle color?
Yeah,
We'll
probably.
see. We'll have to get you.
I do love handles
what
looking
player? What player, Maddie, is swapping jerseys? What size would Vandy need? I like. Do you think he's big enough to fill out a
Winger?
1 or a 3? Yeah, probably
Winger, maybe a 9.
What do they wear? XL?
Wait.
Medium, baby.
Give me one of the big boys. Are you kidding me?
Crop top. We'll give
Yeah.
Vandy a crop top orange jersey. But
That's right.
yeah, 27-20 victory for San Diego. A 80th minute try to win it. It was 2020 going into the final
and
minutes of that match.
74th minute try.
Yeah, 8-4 is now what San Diego Legion's record is. 4-8 now for the Utah Warriors. I think Utah would just like to reset and move on to the next year.
And McEnany out now.
Yeah.
A handful of
that's a
injuries
tough one.
there. But you know what?
Right, but
It was a battle of the scrum halves there. Kieran McClay looked great out there, man. He honestly, he was surprising, and then Tupai looked really good.
I don't know what else to say more. No, I've said all season, Vandy. You've heard me say it all season.
Yeah.
Karen McClee, I mean, yes, Zion going scored a try, but Karen McClee
Is the guy.
I've said it all year. Start him. Just start the guy.
Yeah. And Lincoln McClutchy too. Shout out to him. He played good too.
Yeah. Coming off the bench, Giddo also played well too.
Giddo,
That's a nice little 1-2 combo that they have. coming
Halu
off the
came
bench.
off the bench, scored near at the end. Like
Both of them look good. It was good to see Manson back.
Michael Manson.
I was really happy to see Manson back after him hobbling off the field, and he comes back and does 127 meters gain, 14.2 fantasy points.
most meters in the game, man.
Yeah.
And then a couple other guys to mention here from fantasy performances. I mean, you mentioned Kieran McClee had 13 points with his 2 tries there. Vili Hilu coming off the bench had 12.6 with his try. Tian Lutz, he's a guy that's kind of been playing well over the course of the games that he played. Only has one match that's under 10.5 fantasy points. He's coming off of a round 14 where he scored 17, 11.6 in this one with 68 meters gain and a try assist. And then Matt, you mentioned Makito, 11.4 fantasy points for him, who is becoming a guy that, is pretty solid for you fantasy wise from the fly half position. So if you kind of hopped on that, he might be one of those. He's probably the name where he was your last kind of cry for help at the fly half position. You know what I mean? Like he was probably that last guy that you could have probably picked up for you to kind of find your replacement at fly half if you're any of those guys that were in need of a kicker. Gateau is going to be a guy that's viable to throw in your lineup and set as your kicker each and every week, especially with how San Diego's playing.
Maybe. I ain't crying for help though. But something to note with that McEnany injury, I think Manson, I think we're going to see him go back to that 15 position.
Yep.
And I think that'll be good for him. Like he does well on the wing, but I think he'll have even more space to run, which is what he needs and to score and create something crazy in that back three. So Manson probably to the wing, Isaiah Cruz again to get another start, and be interesting to see.
Isaiah got hurt.
Other role. Oh, Isaiah got hurt. You're
Isaiah
right.
got
You're
hurt.
right. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Joe Mono, Paul Lasike was a last minute drop from the lineup. It'll be interesting to see Jesse Hamilton, does he get in there?
Yeah.
Joe Mono, he wasn't in the lineup at all. What happens with him? So this will be a really interesting time to kind of see who's going to step in that role because they're running out of guys.
All right, now let's head on to the Sunday matchups here. We kicked it off at 2 o'clock Eastern time. Again, we had our second watch party of the year. There on Sunday for the New England Free Jacks taking on the Dallas Jackals at home, which ended up being, I think on paper, it looks like it was a pretty tight match. Watching it, you can go back to our live stream, wasn't as tight as the score would indicate. Dallas scoring kind of that late try to pull within two. But for a majority of that match, New England really dominated the play. They could have converted on a lot more, but they win 26-24. New England now 8-4. Dallas now 5-7, fighting for their life for that last Western Conference playoff spot.
Yeah, and I don't think we have to go into the game too much and outside of our fantasy, but it's nice to see the points here after watching it. I mean, looking at some of the guys, a guy that we really liked, Ethan Fryer. I mean, seeing the type of points that he put up in this game, 19.1 fantasy points.
Yep.
I think we kind of expected that out of him.
Yep. Team of the week honoree at the back row position, like Maddie mentioned, Ethan Fryer with the 19.1. A large part of those meters gained coming from that interception that he had, but he also had 2 breakdown steals. We talked about it during our live stream, Maddie, about how involved he was at the breakdown. Ethan Fryer, we're going to get into him more in the waiver wire segment, but he's a name to definitely look out for. A couple other Team of the Week honorees to shout out: Jason Putros. Flyhouse really not being that point productive lately, with kind of some of how these games are going, but Putros with 13.5 fantasy points for him with that try he scored early in the match and adding 3 conversion kicks to that as well. Putros is locked in there as probably one of the marquee fly halves in the league. And then last, we had a handful of defense set pieces that tied with 3 fantasy points, but gave the edge to the Dallas Jackals there as our Team of the Week defensive set piece with the 3 points for them. A couple other guys to talk about: Thomas Kubia, 15.2 at that center position. Wayne Vanderbank with the try he scored, 14.6. Thomas Milanos, 12.5, and Andrew Quatrin, 11.2. And I will give a shout out to Reese McDonald in his first game back from injury, getting a 10.5 for him. He definitely still hurting, but I think Reese McDonald fantasy managers are happy to see him back in the lineup and hopefully getting better and better each and every week, especially as we head into playoffs.
Yeah, I think we definitely saw the impact that he had on this team, and I'm sure New England is happy to have him back.
All right, last match to talk about on Sunday, RFC Los Angeles taking on the Miami Sharks in what many would consider as kind of the bottom half match of the week. 2 teams, first years. They kind of have similar records. They've both been kind of hot lately, and it was going to be interesting to see who was going to come out in this one. It ended up being, it looked like kind of similar to the Anthem RC match where Miami came out hot, took the lead, but then RFC Los Angeles just put their foot on the pedal and didn't stop. They end up winning 45-15 to now jump up to a 4-7-1 record. Miami Sharks now 4-8.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Miami did start off well, but man, did LA just dominate. I think in the last 30 minutes of the game, like LA just came in there and said, like, you're not going to get the ball back. Even when you do get the ball back, LA's defense played really well. I think this was the best that the LA offense looked, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
The best that they looked all season. So whatever lineup they have, and I mean, that was even after when Niles Saunders got hurt early. They moved Jason Emery into 10. The first half, Jason Emery's a little shaky, but then the second half, right? Like, it seems like this was just a natural choice and a natural option if they don't have Jordan Chait. And yeah, this was definitely the best that their offense looked in those last 30 minutes of that game, and it was really fun to watch.
Well, they were perfect off the boot too. Miami was 0-3 on conversions. Los Angeles was, I think, 5 for 5 with the penalty.
I mean, what makes it even crazier with that, Vandy, is like Emery probably didn't even practice goal kicking.
No.
All week. He probably, and to warm up, he probably didn't even practice goal kicking.
He just embodied himself from last year.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But you know what? The thing was, I thought Nick Grigg was having an absolute game. He was hitting that line. Like, he was figured out the perfect lane and hitting the line with so much speed, blowing through it, could barely tackle him. And then, like you said, the latter half of the game, they just fell apart.
Yeah. I mean, Miami's offense just didn't get anything going in 30 minutes. And I'm going to give credit to the LAD, but like Nick Grigg in this game, in the past 2 games, he's looked like the guy that we wanted to see, the fridge that we wanted to see coming in, just basically taking crash balls and scoring tries.
Yeah, and he was by far the best fantasy performer of the Miami Sharks side. He's also our team of the week center honoree with those 18.6 fantasy points, the 2 tries, 65 meters gain, and 7 tackles to add to that. The other player on the Los Angeles side that we also need to shout out is our second row player of the week, Thomas Caceres, who got 12.1 with 85 meters gain and 12 tackles. And then from there, it's all Los Angeles players. Shout out to back 3 team of the week honoree, friend of the show, Andrew Coe, with 21 fantasy points for him. There you go. 100 meters gained, a try, 10 tackles, and a try assist. Andrew Coe, again, out there with a little bit of that suspension. Without that, I mean, he's probably one of the marquee back 3 players in all of fantasy. Some other guys, I feel like we mention this guy every single week. I mean, Semi Kunatani, starting for the first time in a couple weeks, but I mean, he's gone not 10 straight matches with double digits. Like, he hasn't scored less than 7.3 since round 2.
Even when he comes off the bench, man.
It's crazy. And the past 3 weeks, 17.1, 17.9, 18.3. In this one, a try, 70, 90 meters gain, 13 tackles. He now has 5 straight games where he scored a try. He has 7 tries in the last 5 matches. I mean, this guy's an animal. Best back rower, I think, in all of MLR right now from a fantasy standpoint is Kunatani.
Oh, he's top 3 in the league for all positions anyway, so it doesn't even matter. I mean, we talk about him. I want to talk about Max Kadieko. I mean, he had such a game. What an absolute game this guy had. 1 try assist, 15 tackles, 1 steal, 49 meters gained. He looked absolutely electric. And I think him and Semi Kunatani, they were just a perfect combo, and they came out both having a great game.
Yep. James Stokes, 15 fantasy points. Jason Emery, who we talked about, 14.5. And then Taz Smith with 12.5 in the try that he scored. So exciting week in week 14 that we had between these 5 matches that definitely had its impact in fantasy MLR. And we'll see kind of how this kind of shakes up the playoff landscape when it comes to the final weeks here heading into playoffs. But let's head into now. It's talking about some of the guys that we mentioned in this breakdown and who you may be looking out for here in the waiver wire coming up this week, because I think the waiver wire becomes important now. There are going to be interesting lineup changes this week. It actually may be interesting because there are no bye teams this week, that maybe there's not as heavy as a reliance in there. But I think with the bye Mageddon that we had a couple weeks ago, with kind of the residuals after that, there are guys on the waiver wire that are startable worthy, especially with some injuries that are happening over the weekend. But before we kind of get into those names, my first question for you guys is, what is your approach heading into playoffs here when it comes to the waiver wire in terms of who you are dropping? Guys like Maddie, like you mentioned, JP Duplessis. I would even throw guys like LaRue Milan in there. Guys that have these big time names that haven't produced for you fantasy wise all season long. You haven't had the confidence in them to put them in your starting lineup. Is it more worthwhile to take a flyer if you need the spot and drop one of those big time names at this point of the season for these guys that we're going to mention, who actually you may be more comfortable putting in your lineup?
And Vandy, what's your playoff strategy?
Yeah, you know what? It's to do absolutely nothing.
Kick your feet up and watch the mayhem happen.
You got the toilet bowl.
That's right.
The toilet bowl matters. I'll give you a whole 6-pack of Charbon, with the old wavy lines and everything.
Oh, you know what? You're a sweetheart.
Yeah. Hey, that's just what I do. But no, I mean, look, it's win or go home. Like that's what it is. Like there is no sashing guys for the future. There's no looking into 2 weeks from now. Unless you are feeling really good about your win, you are looking at the waiver wire as, what do I need to get me through this week and get me a dub? And that's the approach that you have to take, unlike what you can take in week 2, week 3, week 4, where you're kind of looking at the long game.
All right, well, let's get into some of these guys then who you may consider picking up this week if you need the players. Again, no teams on bye this week, so you have a full roster to choose from. However, if there are some holes in that starting lineup of yours, these are some of the names to look out for. We'll start in the front row position. If you're a Martin Vaca owner, this is a guy you definitely need to go in on, because Vaca injured in that match against Anthem RC. We don't know, again, and it's obviously injuries that he's been dealing with all season long. We don't know the status of him at this point in time of the recording of this podcast, which is why you should take precaution. If I'm a Vaca owner, if you have any fab left, I'd probably put some down here on this, because Matthews talked about this Old Glory DC set piece. They do score tries. They do have set piece success. And Facundo Gaddis this coming weekend against the New England Free Jacks, because Vaca is out, will have fantasy value this week 15.
Yep. We'll have to see. I mean, it depends on the shoulder. I agree with you. It depends on Vaca's shoulder. But I thought Gaddis looks good every time he comes in. 8.7 points last week when he comes in and subs in for Vaca. So yeah, definitely love to see him there as a nice little waiver pickup. I would put down some fab on him, honestly, if you need a front rower.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next on to the second row position for me, I have Regan O'Gorman. This is a guy that I've had on my waiver wire watch before, and this is a guy that I'm going to talk about again. Again, the ceiling in terms of what you're getting out of Regan O'Gorman is not going to be anything special. However, he's going to guarantee you at least the average amount of points that a second row is expected to get. And what it gives him that upside, he hasn't showed it yet with that opportunity, but he does frequently play above the 70-minute mark to at least get you that bonus point. He does have also double-digit tackles. So in the last 3 of 4 matches that he's played in, he's hit that 70-minute bonus point, and he's had at least 14 tackles at a second row position. I'll take that to guarantee myself 5 fantasy points at that very fantasy point low scoring position.
Yeah, and I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction and go Nathan Den Hoed on the Houston SaberCats. I mean, yes, they might have clinched playoffs, but they're still going to be going for wins. They're going to want to go into season. There's a lot of time left in the year. They can't just start dogging it now. And Nathan Den Hoed hasn't played a lot this season. I mean, he's their captain, and he's a guy who's going to come in and needs to get some more playing time and doesn't really need to rest that much. Plays 80 minutes in the last game, but he's on a strong Houston team. I think he could be a nice little pickup and just see how he does.
All right, and now to the back row position. I'm buying in on the hype, especially with the thin back row room that New England is starting to have with some of the injuries that they're facing. Obviously, we know about Vian Conradi. Seta Baker was added to the injury list this past week. Let's go all in on Ethan Fryer, because Ethan Fryer looked electric for me against that match in the Dallas Jackals game, where I think that if he's in the starting lineup, he is going to provide a lot of fantasy value for you. I mean, not many back row players are doing that intercept try and that speed that he has. Matt, you mentioned on the broadcast about his sevens playing background and that next gear that he has, especially on top of his breakdown involvement. I mean, Ethan Fryer might be a guy that could be a late league winner, especially if you were a Vian Conradi owner and you managed to make playoffs. If you were a Seta Baker owner and that was kind of your move to replace that, Ethan Fryer has upside here that you can take advantage of. It's a risky play. He may not even be in the starting lineup this next week if Seta Baker is back, but I mean, at this point, you got to risk it for the biscuit, and Ethan Fryer might be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you take away that intercept try, and you see a lot more down-to-earth fantasy score there. Yes, he had a great game, but I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction again and go with the guy that I was talking about earlier, Max Kadieko. I think that's how you pronounce it. He had an absolute electric game. Yes, he had a try. He didn't have any long type of try, but he was very involved in that game for LA. Ball handling was just terrific. The way he was on defense, the way he was at the breakdown, he had a little bit in everything and was really able to get involved there. So I think he's going to continue to start. LA is going to see the success with him in the back row, and they're going to keep going with him there, and he's going to have a nice week coming up.
All right, scrum half position now. Again, we're starting to get into now the positions at scrum half and fly half, where there's just not many options out there. But there is one at least that we've been aware of, and that is COC Nye, who we mentioned. Again, I think a lot of fantasy managers dropped COC Nye, seeing that he wasn't in the starting lineup. I expect, like Matthew said earlier, for him to be back in the starting lineup this coming week against San Diego Legion. Hop on that before the lineup comes out. Don't put any bid on him, but at least get that waiver wire claim in if you need a 9 this week. I think COC 9 is definitely a good option for you with that upside that he has to have these explosive games where he's scoring 2 tries and scoring 20 fantasy points at the scrum half position.
He said it all. I agree with you there, bud.
All right, fly half position for me. I'm going pretty risky here. I imagine with the Seattle Seawolves playing a lowly and hurt Utah Warriors team, that a secondary option may come out. I know that Seattle is coming out of a bye, but this may be time to start giving some of their players a rest as they get towards the tail half of the season. I think for me, this is more so a play that you wait and see the lineup. But again, this is also just a reflection of just how thin the fly half position is. Sam Windsor is a guy that you could probably keep an eye on. Maybe not put a waiver wire bid on him, but see when the lineup comes out, because once Sam Windsor starts, he does do well. It's just the question if is the big if he starts this coming weekend. If he does, good pickup.
I think Seattle's a bit too desperate for wins to start resting guys already, even against a Utah team. Like we've seen in this league, well, the one thing that we do know is anybody can beat anybody on any given day.
True.
We even
Except for
seen
Anthem.
Houston lose, except for Anthem. This is true. But I'm going to go with Jordan Chait. I had him on last week. I'm going to put him again this week. They showed a quick little clip of him sitting in an LA Galaxy leather chair. He looked all right.
You're doing the next level research. There you
Yeah,
go.
no doubt.
He was smiling. He looked okay. And I can see him. Look, they're struggling at this 10 position. They need a guy to fill in. I think, yes, Jason Emery might be great. And we'll talk about him as we get into the center position as well. But like, if Jordan Chait is healthy, I think they still go with Jordan Chait in that spot.
What's funny is that these picks that we chose, Maddie, for this fly half position, again, it's just a reflection of just how desperate we are to find a guy that is going to be someone, because these guys can be complete bad. Both of them might not even show in the lineup.
Look,
you know what I mean?
We're not desperate. The people who are trying to get these guys, it sucks to suck if you're that desperate trying to look for a guy.
It's fair.
And hey, I'm sorry that you're in that position.
All right, center position now. Both of us have the same guy in this one. We're on the same page. James Stokes of Rugby Football Club Los Angeles, 74.7 fantasy points on the season. Started at the fullback this past week.
Yeah, he should
is
be back
center
there again.
eligible. I think that just adds to the value that he has. He looked pretty solid from the fullback position there. And if he does start at it again, that's a pretty big advantage for you, just with the space and the ability to get the meters gained that he has from that position, having him slotted in as your center eligible player.
Yeah, and I mean, I have James Stokes there, but there's some other guys that you can look at. Jason Emery, if you need a guy who's eligible to kick, he might be the guy, the kicker, and he saw him, slot 5 conversions and 1 penalty. Like Vandy said in the game that they were absolutely money off the tee, and Jason Emery was a big part of that. So he's definitely another guy to look at. You can look at the Anthem center with Junior Gaffa going out with that injury. I think he'll be back. He looked okay. But if he's not back, I would honestly expect Tarangatira Waitokia to fill in that center role anyway. So, and he's definitely not going to be waiver eligible. So, yeah, I'm going to go with James Stokes. If he continues to start at 15, he's going to continue to get those meters gained, have a lot more opportunity than he did.
All right, back 3 position options here heading into week 15. I'm going with the guy, Maddie, that you had mentioned last week because I think he looked excellent. Perry Humphreys of Old Glory DC, coming off of another solid match in this past week for DC. Perry Humphreys has established himself in the lineup as of late. He's coming off of back-to-back weeks where he's played at the 15 position for the Old Glory DC side, with Jason Robertson shifting up back to that 10 position. 11.8 fantasy points for a season high this past week, 98 meters, 5 tackles, and the full 80 played. Perry Humphreys is maybe not a guy that is going to explode for you for 20 plus points, but he's definitely not going to burn you either in the coming week.
Yeah, and I'm going matchup base here. We got San Diego going against the Anthem this week. And we've seen Alex Ryan. I know, Ryan, you talked about him, but we've seen him come into the lineup and have a pretty good appearances. I mean, in round 12 and 13, 12 points and 8.6 points. If they kind of put in a little different lineup this week and put Alex Ryan in that 15 position, I could see him kind of going off.
All right. And then last thing here is defense set piece. The only one available in the Fantasy Ruckers League is the Chicago Hounds. So we're going to play a fun game. We're going to play a fun game here because Chicago coming off by, not surprising to see them on the waiver wire. What teams are you playing Chicago over? So I'm going to start with LA. You're picking, or not LA, Anthem. You're picking Chicago over Anthem?
Yeah, it's a silly question, but yeah, I'll play your game.
Chicago over Miami.
Yeah.
Chicago over Utah.
Yeah.
Chicago over LA.
Yeah.
Chicago over Dallas.
Yeah.
Chicago over San Diego.
Yep.
Chicago over Old Glory DC.
Nope.
Okay. Over New England.
Yep.
Over Houston.
Nope.
I was going
Over
to say,
Seattle.
you're crazy.
Over Seattle.
Sorry?
Seattle.
No.
And last over NOLA.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have them pretty high up. So Chicago,
order.
look at there, and we'll see how that goes. All right. Well, a couple names to look out for again in this week 15 coming up. If you need any options, again, any of those guys should be viable for you. Well, let's head into now our week 15 preview. We've been doing pretty good, boys, at predicting winners here. Not too bad. Definitely over Vandy's line of 50% of 500. I am still in the lead at 50, 20, and 2. Maddie, you're 45, 25, and 2. Don't say that. Don't discredit this portion of the show just because I'm doing good in it.
No. That's not the reason why.
All right. 45, 25, and 2 is you, Maddie, and then Vandy, you're 41, 29, and 2. I'd like to see if you could pass Maddie by the end of the year. You're very close. You can do it.
I told you I'm coming for it.
You're coming.
Yeah, okay.
And again, we
copying my picks.
And again, we have a full slate of matches.
That doesn't work then.
We have a full slate of matches coming up in this upcoming week. And hey, boys, we don't start this week with the Anthem. Isn't that crazy? We start off with a pretty good one, though. Old Glory DC
finally
taking on the New England Free Jacks at home. 7 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff happening on Saturday. Should be a pretty good one here. Old Glory DC 5-5-2. New England 8-4.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tough one for Old Glory. I think New England Free Jacks are looking for some revenge here.
Okay. Do any fantasy kind of breakdown in this? Anything that you're seeing particular in this matchup, Maddie?
I mean, I don't know. I think we'll see a pretty big game. I think the set piece will actually figure it out. I think they came off a nice little momentum from that last game. So a big game potentially from Q, big game from that New England Free Jack set piece. I think Segrin or Seta Baker, if he's back, we might see a big game from them too. And as usual, Wayne Vanderbank, Reese McDonald, I think those two. I think Daniel Morgan Pudarangi comes in for Balakina. And on Old Glory DC side, I mean, good luck.
I honestly am thinking about benching Axel Muller this week. Like, he's coming off of a tough game against the Anthem. Didn't score necessarily that great against them.
A rough
he's
one.
Taking on New England, a stout defense. That's definitely not a crazy thought to have. But I mean, I'm definitely a little bit hesitant on my Old Glory DC stocks here this coming week against New England. I'm going to go New England in this one as well. Vandy, what do you got?
Yeah, you know what? After Matt's little breakdown there, I have to go New England.
All right. Next matchup on Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The Houston SaberCats at home, 11-1, taking on RFC Los Angeles at 4-7-1. Both teams coming off of wins in Week 14, but Houston has looked hard to stop. I feel like we're going to all be on the same page with this one. I am buying in again on all my Houston SaberCats stocks and fantasy assets until explained otherwise. I don't know what RFC Los Angeles guys that I'm putting into my lineup. It's going to be a tough one. I'm going to try to look at other options. I don't like playing players, especially when you're on a weaker team, against the Houston SaberCats, and it's going to be tough. I think outside of your marquee kind of names, I probably am trying to shy away.
Well, I mean, actually, James Stokes is a guy that I would play. If he's at 15, Houston is not afraid to kick and make you run back, and James Stokes can definitely do that, and he showed he can. So I wouldn't be too worried about that one. But yeah, I got Houston in this one. I think defensively they're just way too good, and yeah, they're going to continue rolling. I think again they're going to want to go into with some momentum into the playoffs.
All right, Houston for me as well. Vandy?
Yeah, I mean, how do you go against Houston?
All right,
I've said
so
Shield since like no. I said Shield in like week 1 or 2. Don't even. You guys.
It's true. I do remember that. Man. We'll pull up the tape.
Okay.
We'll pull up the tape. All right, first matchup of the Sunday now. The San Diego Legion taking on Anthem Rugby Carolina. San Diego 8-4. Anthem 0-12. Again, I feel like this is another one where we're all going to be on the same page. Put in all my San Diego assets. I mean, I'm talking Connor Tupai, Awake if he's in the lineup. Everyone that's on my San Diego team.
I bet you Tupai's not starting.
Then that would be an interesting
Christensen's going to start.
Yeah.
And Danny Christensen actually hasn't looked too bad.
I messaged out to Fitzy.
Okay.
I said, well, Tupai's
relax,
not going to
Ryan.
play. It's going to be Danny Christensen.
He scored 1 try of the week, all right? Doesn't mean he's looking amazing at 9.
I never said amazing. I just said he looks all right. And
so
I mean,
the same Holden Younger sentiment. Like, relax.
What can I say? Holden Younger won me the friggin' week this week. I played him. He got a try assist. It was great. I love the Holden Younger train.
Look at that.
But I mean, I think we can be pretty quick on this one. I'm going San Diego in this one. I still like my Carolina assets, White Tokia, Clive and Laubser.
I think Anthem's still going to put up points like they always do, but yeah, San Diego's going to take it. Look out for a little bit of a weird San Diego side potentially coming out with some players that are maybe aren't used to seeing in the lineup, kind of filling in there in some spots.
Sure. So everyone's going San Diego on this one.
Yep.
Yeah, you
All
would,
right.
Vandy.
All right. So 3 matches in, all on the same page. We'll see if that changes here. This might be one that does that. The Miami Sharks taking on the NOLA Gold. Miami coming off of that tough loss. They are now 4-8. They are now at home taking on the NOLA Gold. I feel like I'm calling this the game of smoke screens because these are 2 teams that have looked absolutely fantastic at times and 2 teams that have looked absolutely disgusting at times. So what are we going to get from these 2 teams this coming week? I guess we'll see.
Yeah, this is a tough one, but NOLA Gold's
I was thinking the same thing.
NOLA Gold's got a lot to play for here, and they got a lot to play for. I'm gonna put last week as a bit of a like anomaly because they were on a little bit of a 3-game winning streak. They run into a tough Houston side and some tough weather that's definitely favorable to Houston. They're gonna hope Jonah Mo's back in their lineup. But, I think I'm going to go NOLA here. I think I like them. I like their chances here. I like their chances against Miami. I think Miami's still missing their key guy, Manuel Ardejo. And Miami's going to have to work for this one for sure.
Yeah, same thing for me. Exact same reasonings. I'm going NOLA as well. Vandy?
Oh, this is how you could possibly get ahead. This is the only possible way.
I don't know. There's other ones. There's other ones over there. There's a nice little Dallas Chicago.
I know that
next.
was even better.
There's a Seattle Utah. You got to go Utah on that one, right? Or else you hate the team.
No, I'll go with Seattle because I do hate them right now. Damn it, I'm doing it. Go Miami.
Okay.
You would.
Okay.
This is the only way to possibly get ahead.
All right. Next matchup of Sunday, the Dallas Jackals taking on the Chicago Hounds. Dallas 5-7, coming off that tough loss to New England. Chicago coming off the bye 5-6-1. This is probably going to be the most interesting matchup of the weekend, I think. This one's going to be fun. I think it's going to be back and forth. Dallas has a lot to prove after what was a tough outing against New England. Chicago trying to figure things out as they are coming off the bye. But I like the assets in all of this match. I think this one is going to be the one with probably the most fantasy production out on both sides.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I'm going to say the opposite.
Yeah, I was thinking more defensive.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game. I think Dallas is going to kick the ball a lot to Chicago, and I think Chicago is going to make some mistakes, potentially kick it back. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair here. But yeah, I mean, this is a real tough one. I think I'm going to go Chicago here.
All right, Matt goes Chicago. I'm going Dallas in this one because I have to.
Yeah. You're a diehard Dallas Jackals fan.
No, not yet.
Oh,
can't go back now.
Tough.
You already got a scarf.
This one's tough.
Vandy, you're trying to catch up to me. There's only one thing that you can do.
What's Sam Gall looking like?
He's probably not. He is injured. I heard he had surgery, actually.
Ooh, big time. Okay. Go Chicago.
All right, Vandy's going Chicago. Trying to
What the
catch up
heck,
to me
you
here.
But based
All
on the odds, I'm betting the other one.
Degenerate Dambles.
I think Dallas will be the favorite team here in this one.
Don't go into the triple D segment.
At home,
Dallas is at home.
Don't leak into the triple D segment.
All right. Seattle Seawolves taking on the Utah Warriors to wrap up Week 15. Seattle coming off the bye, 9-3. Utah, tough loss to San Diego, 4-8. I mean, it's straightforward here, right? I mean, Utah is hurting right now with the injuries that they have. I think there will be streamers to have on the Utah side with that injury to McEnany. We'll see kind of what happens there. Maddie predicting a Manson shift over to the fullback position. Isaiah Cruz injured, so there might be some back three players that you can maybe look at for their in streaming spots. But I think Seattle is going to feast in this one, so I'm going Seattle in this one. I love all my fantasy assets on Seattle.
Yeah, I'm going to Seattle. Oh my gosh, I forgot. You know, we should have talked about him in our waiver wire pickup, but Tavit Lopetti, Tavita Kurjani is definitely out for the rest of the year. There's no way that old man gets back in. So Defeat Lopetti is definitely a guy that you have to look for. And I think actually the backline for Seattle is going to have a pretty good big game here.
And I did tell you another guy that I wanted to mention also as a player. I mentioned him last week was what's his name? The back row, Manute Akoi.
Yeah,
I believe
he's already picked up.
Minotti already picked up, and I told you needed to hop on him last week if you wanted to get that because he's probably going to pick up that 8-man production there. So I'm going Seattle. Maddie, you're in Seattle.
Yep.
And Vandy,
aren't I kind of forced into this? I'm
Yeah,
not.
you gotta go Utah.
You're your own man.
Well,
There's a chance. No, not without BWR. You know what? If we were healthy, I'd go Utah. That's just ridiculous. I'm gonna lose. I have no chance catching man if I go Utah.
hey, we
All
got
right.
3 more weeks.
Going Seattle. All right. So it looks like the different matchups in this one: the Miami Sharks, NOLA Gold, Dallas Jackals, Chicago Hounds. Should be an interesting one. Love to see the full slate of matches heading into Week 15. All right. Well, hey, this is what we have been talking about the past couple of weeks. And we had our live stream the past week there, picking our cards. And OvalYe has challenged us to giving their tournaments a go. And here we have our brand new segment, OvalYe with Vandy,
OvalYe.
presented by OvalYe. And now we'll go into this and talk about some of the strategies that we've learned, the cards that we got, and really break down here what OvalYe is all about. And I guess we'll start off here. Now that we're 1 week into it, boys, I mean, what did you learn? We had some big time performers over the past week with the kind of differentiated scoring. Some of the guys on there, Semi Kunitani, Jason Putros, obviously Longwell in there. Jason Emery was a big time guy in that as well.
Yeah.
How many of those guys did you guys buy as part of your cards, and how many of those guys do you have in your lineup?
Thank goodness I had 2,300 left because I strolled up to the starting lineups getting released, and I realized that half my lineup wasn't even in the starting lineups. So I had to do a quick little bid. Had to go pick up Oscar Collar. Had to go pick up Gemma Banana Schultz, and plug them into the lineup for my limited MLR limited. And then the free to play, it was just like stress free, you know. But going back to the cards, yeah, I definitely had to pick up some depth there just to make sure that I had guys just getting out of this bye week. But now we're out of the bye week. Now I got my cards back. Hopefully the guys that I have will be able to sub in and play into that lineup and get me some points.
And that's where it leads to the strategy side of things, because there are very big different strategies between the free-to-play version on OvalYe and when you're purchasing your cards and trying to build that lineup that you're going to put each and every single week. From the free-to-play side, very similar to our weekly challenge, where you just kind of look at matchups, you kind of see who you predict on where those points are going to be, and you slot those in. From the NFT side of it in the tournaments, we're in the limited tournament competing. I've learned that depth portion, Maddie, it was good that I think we all came up with the similar strategies on our live stream where we kind of, instead of going for a couple really, really expensive cards, we kind of just built our teams around some of these kind of
You guys are broke though.
limited
Yeah,
cards.
pretty broke.
Yeah. These limited cards where we kind of built our lineup from there, because I think with the volatility of Major League Rugby and how there are guys in and out of the lineup, teams on bye, you're just never going to have the same guys that you can rely on each and every week, even if it's your most marquee guy. So for me, at least, it was huge to have basically a backup to every position. You know, AJ Alatimu I bought as a card, wasn't in the lineup, so I had to put in Reese McDonald there. I bought as a backup. Manuel Ardeo was a guy that I had, wasn't able to slot in my lineup, so I had a backup for him. So really, there's so many layers to the limited tournament where you're purchasing your card, because it really is like managing an actual team, a 5-man lineup, and trying to manage who is and who's not available.
Yeah, I got pretty lucky on mine. I bought all these guys on stream. I got Dual Kotse, Jason Dam, Hodgson, Wayne Vanderbank, and Trangatira Waitokia. So
Hey,
I had
that's
a
a pretty
easy.
good lineup right there.
Yeah, I had
That's a pretty
sweet.
good lineup. But man, I rocked up Friday, and we talk about what cards we're looking for. I have no idea what I'm looking for, because it matters what's available in the auction, right?
Yeah.
You're looking for a bargain. That's the card that I'm looking for.
Yeah,
A dang bargain.
you're not necessarily looking for a certain person in particular, because a lot of these names, like in our form of rugby, you know, there might be pretty big differences, but you look at their rating and it's like the difference between an 85 and an 82.
Yeah.
You know, it's substantial, but it's not crazy. And it could be a couple hundred coins worth of difference. So
Right. And it's funny because it's also like it keeps you addicted as well, because like I feel like the people who are going to be rewarded are the people that are going to be checking out that marketplace like regularly and just seeing what cards are available, because there's a chance that you hop on there. Oh my gosh, there's a card on there. Like I jumped in and there was a Tarangatira Waitokia card that was like a whole bunch of tokens less than the next one. So you just hop on those opportunities, which is interesting.
And we talk about some value plays. I mean, let's get away from the limited maybe, but into the free to play, right? Because one, one of the value plays is definitely, I've talked about him. Manson's going to go off at 15 this weekend, I think. And I have yet to see a Manson limited card in the auction or in the trade.
Yeah, good
so
luck.
I don't think he's going to show up. But in free to play, hey, it's
got
free
him.
reign. You can pick whatever guy you want. You're going Manson, you're going your Kunatanis, you're definitely going some San Diego guys, whether that's Cyril Kama, whether that's Hugh Roach, whether that's whoever on that San Diego side, you're definitely throwing them in there. But yeah, I mean, I think that free to play where you really feel like you're playing that weekly challenge, except you don't have the $15 salary cap limit.
Which
I'm
also
just throwing everything that I got.
Right, which also makes it harder because it just opens up, at least like when you're doing the weekly challenge, you're like, you have a guideline, right? I need to get this X dollar and follow that. But with weekly, with the OvalYe free to play tournament, it's just open ended. So like, you can make a bunch of wrong choices or a bunch of right choices because you just have that unlimited possibility. Just to wrap it up here, though, in terms of cards that you're looking for now moving forward here to kind of bolster your limited tournament cards, I mean, what are we looking for? For me, maybe there's some value there, Matt. The guys that are returning from injury, guys that haven't appeared, who maybe have dropped in value a little bit that you foresee going up. You said that you haven't seen Manson cards on there, but maybe a guy to keep a lookout for. I know I was able to hop on a Reese McDonald card with him being out a little bit at the cheaper value. I think those are guys that I'm looking for, especially who may be returning here to kind of add to my lineup once I'm able to get some more tokens there after some tournament wins.
Yeah,
I'm just looking for a bargain.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for a bargain.
Just looking for a bargain. All right, well, that does it for the OvalYe with Vandy, presented by OvalYe here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show. All right, well, last segment of the show, we always wrap up here, is the Triple D, Devin's Degenerate Dambles segment.
Going to Dambletown.
We're going to Dambletown. It's been an interesting ride that has been varying for Vandy and myself, who have been exploring the world of MLR betting. For me, it has been a rough and tough and strenuous process. I have lost money frequently, and I have lost money again in week 14. Went with the parlay, the loser's parlay that Vandy had suggested to me last week. Did not work. It was going to win me a whole bunch. I think I put down $1. Would have made me like $300. I also tried to go with the Dallas Jackals upset and the Anthem upset, which had good odds in there. I should have put money down on RFC Los Angeles. They were the underdog heading into that game, and I know that's where Vandy hit.
Let's go! That's right. That's what makes you the degenerate, baby. Yeah,
there you go.
I think you got that graphic a little messed up there.
I'll fix it. I'll fix it eventually.
Anyways, this week, I played a little more conservative. 2 weeks ago, I took a pretty big.
That's not degenerate.
Yeah, well, I took a pretty big hit. There's only X amount of money in the bank right now. So, but this week went with a $5 parlay. Took LA, Houston, San Diego, and the Free Jacks, and that hit. So that was pretty nice. That brought me back $28. And then I was feeling crazy, and I put $5 on Anthem because I was like, those odds at plus 1,200 were ridiculous.
I know.
And then I also did the loser parlay that Ryan did.
So how much you win this week? You put down a total of.
So this week I'm up $17.
Up $17. So you're now up like $40. You've won $40 on the season so far, which is pretty good. All right, well then let's get into what you have coming up this week. You have a full slate of matches to choose from. Lock of the week, Vandy. What are you putting down as?
Lock of the week. It's gonna kill me to say it. You already know it, but it's Seattle. With just how banged up Utah is, they have some major key pieces out against that seawall at home. It's gonna be pretty tough.
So who do you think will have better odds? Do you think Seattle at home will have better value odds, or Houston at home will have better odds? Probably the Seattle one, huh?
I would say just because of recency bias with LA, that Seattle's going to be higher favorites to win. And especially with the injuries, Vegas keys in on that.
All right.
Vegas, and then, more like some dude in his basement.
That's what it feels like when it comes to sometimes MLR betting. And then Vandy, your parlay of the week, what are you thinking?
I think you go with the 5-piece here, and your risky one would be the Dallas Chicago one. So if you did Seattle, San Diego, Houston, Free Jacks, and then you could kind of play with Miami, NOLA if you want.
That game scares you.
Yeah, that game scares me. So I would I would put your risk factor on the Dallas versus Chicago. I'm gonna take Chicago.
All right.
What about a cheeky little two-way Miami and Dallas?
Well, okay, wait. I want to see the odds first because if it is close, just because Dallas at home, I'd probably take. Like if it's only, plus 110 for Chicago, I'm going to take Dallas.
Confusing lines.
I think Dallas will be favored in that one.
Dallas will definitely be favored.
Yeah,
but if they're only like negative,
sure.
And then I'm just gonna go with a fun little one with Miami beating NOLA. There'll be good money there with Miami being 4-8, NOLA being 7-5. You're probably looking at a nice 250 plus 350 one there. That's a nice $5 payout there.
A rare week where your pick matches with your bet. I like to see that. Well, hey, that's another edition of the Triple D Devin's Degenerate Dambles. He's been doing well. Me, not so hot. I should probably listen to him more. And if you're listening out there, you should probably listen to Vandy as well with some of the inside knowledge that he has with his gambling degeneratisms. Is that a word? I don't know.
That's a Rickyism if I ever heard it. That was a Trailer Park Boy moment.
Anyways, but yeah, fun week again. Playoff hunt is heating up. Fantasy Ruckers playoffs start this weekend. Good luck to all there. And hey, final regular season. Final regular season week for of the other Fantasy Ruckers League members. Again, follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers, handles up above. If you're watching on the YouTube video, down below in the description. If you're listening on the pod, give us a like, subscribe, comment. Give us all this our fun stuff as we approach the tail end of this Fantasy MLR season. All right, boys. Anything else that you have for the people?
I'm sitting back and relaxing.
Oh, boy. All right. And Vandy's already looking up and seeing if he get any inside knowledge on the odds. All right. Well, hey, for Matt Yee, for Devin, Vandy, Vanderpool, I'm Ryan Yee, and we'll see you next week on another edition of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Bye week, baby.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.